I'm Renton McLaughlin. So, the New Zealand government thinks it's too hard for parents to get rid of their unborn kids. Even with the barriers which presently exist, there were still over 13,000 unborn children killed in 2018, yet the government wants to remove even these obviously ineffective barriers. Thus they've introduced the abortion legislation bill, which has passed its first reading. It will decriminalise the killing of unborn children, making it possible to kill them right up to birth without any legal consequence. In an interview, Andrew Little, whose name the bill is under, dismissed the charge that kids could be killed right up to birth. He said, "No, that's an absurd sort of statement that gets made by the fanatic anti-abortion people." Yet in answer to the very next question, he contradicted himself, saying, in reference to an abortion after 22 weeks, well, the health professional carrying out the abortion will have an obligation to be satisfied that the abortion is appropriate given the woman's physical and mental health as well as her well-being. Here's what the bill says in this regard. This bill repeals the current legal grounds for authorising abortion. It also repeals the role of and requirement for certifying consultants. The effect of the changes is that, for a woman who is not more than 20 weeks pregnant, there would be no statutory test that the health practitioner needs to apply. The practitioner would continue to be required to ensure that the woman makes an informed choice and gives informed consent. For a woman who is more than 20 weeks pregnant, the statutory test would require the health practitioner to reasonably believe that the abortion is appropriate with regard to the pregnant woman's physical and mental health and well-being. Obviously, there are no limitations here right up to birth, except that a health practitioner will have to give the okay, and that's hardly a limitation. Watching this clip, I thought of Hannah Arendt's term, the banality of evil, which she coined at the trial of the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem in 1962. Arendt suggested that while Eichmann's actions were evil, he did not display evil intentions, but was simply a profoundly ordinary functionary, a boring bureaucrat carrying out his bureaucratic duties without any thought or remorse for the impact these had on the millions of people he transported to the death camps. Christopher Hitchens took up Arendt's idea. Well, as Hannah Arendt famously said, there can be a banal aspect to evil. In other words, it doesn't present always. I mean, often what you're meeting is a very mediocre person. Arendt had an issue at this point with the concept of evil, and she's been criticised for not recognising sufficiently the evil involved. But our culture has an issue with evil also, given it's a secular culture, one that takes no account of anything beyond the material realm. As a consequence, the dominant culture in New Zealand no longer recognises a higher law, and thus has no grounds for saying anything is right or wrong, good or evil. Without an external standard outside the human race, a higher law to which we're all subject, what is the basis for such concepts? With no higher law, there are simply no grounds to judge anything as truly immoral and evil. You're left with human beings playing God, which some people rarely like to do. And it's not only an Eichmann who gives little thought to the consequences of their actions and displays no remorse for their part in a Holocaust. Those promoting this bill display exactly the same characteristics. Little sits there being interviewed, appearing as a boring, mediocre functionary, yet is pushing an extension to the Holocaust already inflicted on the unborn of New Zealand, apparently without any thought to the consequences of his action, thus the banality of his evil. Of course, he doesn't think he's promoting evil at all, as he's playing God and determines good and evil for himself. And killing unborn kids, he has declared, is not evil. Contrary to all the evidence, he doesn't even consider them human. Actually, neither does the present or the proposed law. Has he reflected on what his bill means for the unborn children affected by it? Has he reflected on what happens to them during their killing, being torn limb from limb by powerful suction machines or various tools of dismemberment which shred their bodies, crush their skulls and suck out their brains? Or the damage it afflicts on the woman whose pregnancy is terminated, even though at The time she may think she wants to be rid of her child and may have no awareness of the damage being done to her, or the very real possibility of abortion regret and guilt which could haunt her for the rest of her life, or the damage to the father of the child killed, or to the born siblings whose brother or sister was killed and discarded by their parents, or what such callous, indifferent brutality does long term, not only to those who participate in it, but a culture that endorses it. There's a profound disconnect from reality here. And then we have the Prime Minister, the leader of the Labour Party, an unmarried woman who recently had a baby which the media cooed over, promoting the killing of babies. I wrote to the Dominion Post regarding this some time ago, but the editor saw fit not to publish my letter, which didn't surprise me given the socialist bias of the paper. I said, "Given all the press and praise the unwed PM is receiving for having her baby, I imagine if she had decided to abort the child instead, such writers would all be waxing lyrical about her great courage in the face of a difficult decision. And killing the kid I picked was quite on the cards. After all, you don't get to the top of the Labour Party today for being staunchly pro-life. Perhaps, even hopefully, though I concede it's a long shot, having a child may give her a new view on the sanctity of life and the abomination her party promotes. Then again, she may abort the next one, and she may." Apparently bringing a child to birth and beyond has not changed any of her views regarding the value of an unborn child's life, or the evil her party promotes. She is in fact leading the charge, seeking to force her perverted views on the whole country, and shows no regret or remorse for doing so. If ever a term applied to the unborn, it is, they are us. Law is a teacher, but what is this law, or the present law for that matter, teaching? How can treating the killing of an unborn as essentially no different to a tooth extraction, or the removal of an appendix, as some have said, not affect how we view born children? Is it surprising that there's an epidemic of abuse of born children, given such devaluation of unborn children? If you can kill them legitimately before birth because they're inconvenient and get in the way, why not after birth when they can really get in your face and disrupt your life? What difference does birth make? Why should the Prime Minister's daughter be viewed as having any more value than any of these tens of thousands of kids in the country killed with her mother's blessing before their birthday? In fact, why should the Prime Minister herself be viewed as having any more value than any of those same terminated children? What difference does 39 years or so make? Or the fact that at the moment she sits on the top of the heap? Everything is devalued. But hypocrisy writ large kicks in. And these same people who call for the destruction of the unborn, seeing it as the epitome of enlightenment and progressive policy, wail long and loud over abuse of born children. And in spite of this, they actually abuse every child in the country by scaring them witless with their politically correct doomsday tea leaf readings regarding climate change and the end of the world as we know it, which rise no higher than the prognostications of astrologers and soothsayers of old. They profess grief over youth suicide, yet promote euthanasia. They go on about the liberation of women, yet promote the killing of unborn females. They obsess over a tiny number of white supremacists and ignore the vast number of Islamic jihadists. They cry because 50 people got shot, but promote the killing of thousands. In a knee-jerk reaction, they've made owning certain rifles illegal, even though this will only affect the law-abiding and not criminals. And they ignore the zillions of other things that can be used to kill, not least of which are scissors, forceps and surgical vacuum cleaners, which have a far higher kill rate than any gun. They promote socialism, even though it's only ever brought tyranny, misery and destruction of nations. What else would you expect from a system based on plunder, with the incompetence of centralised bureaucratic planning thrown in for good measure? They think Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot, Castro, Chavez and a host of other petty socialist tyrants didn't do it right, and that if only they can have a go, this time it will work. And that's not all. Having already disregarded the binary complementary nature of human sexuality in their promotion of the homosexual agenda, They've moved on to deny that sex and gender are synonymous, so that now apparently upward of 80 genders are supposed to exist, any of which take priority over biological sex. And not content to stop there, they now deny the biological reality of male and female, asking us all to join them in their delusion, that if a male thinks he's a female, then he is, and vice versa. This gross folly is allowing men in some places free entry into women's restrooms, and as one sweeping consequence will undoubtedly, if unchecked, bring about the end of women's sport. This insanity has got to the point that apparently a male claiming to be a woman tells women that they have no idea what it means to be a female. You couldn't make this stuff up, and it would be hilarious for its stupidity if it wasn't so tragic and diabolic and such a threat to freedoms the West has taken for granted for so long. And yet these supposedly sane people in Parliament look you in the eye and say with a straight face that this is the way the world is and we have to accept it. And we'll punish you if you don't address a person by their preferred pronoun. As somebody said, believe me, guns are not the problem. If I can change my gender on my birth certificate, why can't I change the date I was born? In fact, why do I even need a birth certificate, as perhaps I consider myself a horse, a cat, or a koala bear, perhaps even a compost bin, or the spare wheel of a car? Given I think I'm any of these or anything else, why should I pay tax, as animals, compost bins and spare wheels don't pay tax? Why should people who are so delusional and disconnected from reality be in positions of authority in this country, where they can put forward such abominations as this abortion legislation bill? Shouldn't they be locked away so they can't harm the rest of us with their delusions? How come such delusion acts now sit on top of the pyramid of society? There's a major worldview issue highlighted in this question of either killing or valuing the unborn. The secular culture, which dominates in New Zealand at present, makes the claim that the universe either exploded into existence from absolutely nothing or from some pre-existing eternal material something. There are no other options. Getting something from nothing is somewhat problematic, so most say that it all came from something, even though this is equally tricky. One name given to this view is evolution. It says the universe and everything within it made itself without a single thought being given to it. There was no mind anywhere to have such a thought. Evolution encompasses everything, as big-name evolutionist Theodosis Dobzhansky spells out.
Evolution comprises all stages of the development of the universe, the cosmic, biological, and human or cultural developments. Attempts to restrict the concept of evolution to biology are gratuitous.
This view is the dominant cultural, religious, philosophical view in New Zealand at present, and it controls the thinking of all formative areas of culture, including government. The late William Provine, in debate with Philip Johnson over the matter of intelligent design at Stanford University in 1994, spelt out the implications of evolution.
Let me summarize my views on what modern evolutionary biology tells us loud and clear, and I must say that these are basically Darwin's views. There are no gods, no purposive forces of any kind, no life after death. When I die, I am absolutely certain that I'm going to be completely dead. That's just all, that's going to be the end of me. There is no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning in life, and no free will for humans either.
Solomon, the author of Ecclesiastes in the Bible, was just as blunt. To summarize his take on it, life is meaningless, and then you die. Given everything is a product of random, undirected processes, it's thus meaningless and amoral, and nothing has any value except that which any individual or group gives it. But any such meaning or value is totally arbitrary and is just as meaningless as everything else. This is a real surprise. If everything is ultimately meaningless, why does everything appear to have meaning? The usual solution to this dilemma is to say that meaning is only apparent and is not real. So, given that nothing has any real value, then the unborn has no value, and if you want, it can be treated as worthless, destroyed and incinerated with no loss, no consequence or morality involved. The Nazis held precisely this same view, but didn't just limit its application to the unborn. Rather, they applied it to whole groups of people who they devalued to the point they were deemed worthless, destroyed and incinerated. Were the Nazis wrong in doing this? Of course not. Because in such a world as postulated, right and wrong are meaningless, so nothing is truly wrong. By what standard could we say they were wrong? We may dislike what the Nazis did, but that's really no different to us saying we dislike donuts. It just expresses a personal preference. Most politicians in New Zealand haven't gone as far as the Nazis yet. However, that's changing, and this abortion legislation bill certainly brings New Zealand law nearer to that of National Socialist Germany under Hitler. As this view is seriously disconnected from reality, it should be no surprise if people who hold it are delusional, irrational, amoral, and disconnected from reality, as mentioned before. Everyone lives their life in terms of meaning, purpose, and morality, even those who deny meaning, purpose, and morality. You can't live it any other way. We get up for a reason, we have breakfast for a reason, fill our days with a million things that inherently have meaning, purpose, and morality. Those who get into Parliament are usually passionate about things they think are right or wrong and seek to impose their passion on the rest of us by passing legislation to force us to conform to their views. For the majority of them, this passion is ultimately a meaningless charade. No amount of passion, proximate meanings or moral causes can overcome the fact, William Provine stated bluntly, ultimately there is no meaning or morality or value to anything. Life is meaningless and then you die. Reality, the way the world actually is, and their philosophy, the way they think the world actually is pulling in opposite directions, resulting in these inevitable manifestations of irrationality, delusion, disconnection from reality. The only way to escape this bleak and barren worldview is to hold one where meaning and purpose and morality are real, not simply apparent. Such a worldview does not understand the universe as exploding mindlessly into existence. Rather, it's all the purposeful work of a creator of unimaginable genius and creative ability, who has expressed the beauty and artistry of his own being in the things he has made, his own character being the grounds for the higher law to which we're all subject and can't escape. It's thus no surprise that we all live in terms of meaning and morality. The surprise would be if we didn't. If things are made, they have a meaning. If they aren't, they don't. As the pinnacle of his creation, he made humans in his own image with a likeness to himself. Intelligent, creative, moral beings to be stewards and protectors and developers of the rest of his creation. Thus, human beings have immense imputed value, not only because they've been made by God and made to rule, but because they specifically, uniquely, and individually bear the image of God as no other creature does. And this applies to the unborn as well. Rather than simply being warmed over pond scum to be wiped away at will with no consequence, they bear the image of God, and their willful and brutal destruction will eventually bring down the retribution of their Maker, whose image they bear. Think of the most valuable thing that you've ever made, into which you've poured your creative and technical skill. There it sits in your home on display for guests and visitors and you to admire. How would you feel if one of these guests, who has no creative skill such as you have, with not the slightest consideration or appreciation or acknowledgement of the time and the painstaking effort and the investment of yourself you had poured into it, intentionally and without remorse smashed your prized work to smithereens, treating it with utter contempt as worthless? How then do you think the Maker of the unborn feels about the willful, contemptuous, inhumane desecration of his masterpiece? This world is not our creation. We are not God. It does not depend on us. We did not design or build it, and thus we do not determine reality. Reality is an objective given we either accept or, as many insanely do today, reject. If we reject the created order, maybe thinking reality is a subjective matrix of our own making, it will come back and bite us. It can't be beat. Sometimes the bite is immediate, as in those deluded who think they can fly by jumping off a tall building. Despite their delusion, the direction and the duration of their flight is determined by the reality outside their head. Other times the bite may be delayed for years, for example, when naive, stupid, delusional, corrupt, egocentric policies put in place by naive, stupid, delusional, corrupt, egocentric politicians bring about the destruction of societies and nations. Can we conclusively decide between these worldviews? Yes, we can. Evolution says no thought or design or planning was involved in bringing life, the universe and everything to be. Thus there was no forethought, thinking ahead in anticipation of what was to come in the future. Arch-evolutionist Richard Dawkins spelt this out. Natural selection, the blind, unconscious, automatic process which we now know is the explanation for the existence and apparent purposeful form of all life, has no purpose in mind, it has no mind and no mind's eye, it does not plan for the future, it has no vision or foresight, no sight at all. In contrast, the creation worldview says that everything is the product of mind, and thus we should expect to find clear evidence of this by means of evident forethought expressed in the things we observe. Is there such evidence? Yes, there is. Let's just take one blindingly clear example from the life of the unborn. The baby develops and thrives within a watery environment and has no need of lungs. Yet it develops lungs in anticipation of its future life outside the womb, which requires breathing air. Not only so, but a raft of critical systems in the baby enable it first to live in water without the use of lungs, and then transition rapidly to an air environment where lungs are essential. These systems bear clear evidence of forethought, of future planning, anticipating this extremely brief period of transition. You only need one case of evident forethought such as this to refute the evolution view, and with it the devaluation of unborn children which leads to their destruction by people who hold it. It is thus refuted and should be rejected. On the other hand, the creation view is established and should be accepted, along with the immense value of unborn children made in the image of their Maker, which renders them inviolable. Thus the unborn should be protected by legislation, rather than being legislated against, killed and discarded as so much worthless trash. Vote for those who would outlaw this evil.